The galaxy trembled when the Kralith moved through space. Their massive black ships looked like giant insects flying between the stars. Each ship was the size of a small city, covered in dark metal that seemed to drink in light. Sharp spikes jutted out from every surface. Weapons that could melt entire planets hung from their holes like deadly claws. Commander Vextel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Death's Edge. He was 12 feet tall with skin like black stone. His forearms ended in claws that could cut through steel, and his eyes glowed red in the darkness of space. Behind him, dozens of his warriors worked at control stations, their own claws clicking against metal keyboards as they guided the fleet. Through the void, the Kralith had been the strongest species in the galaxy for over 300 years. They came from a world called Vorthok, where the rain was acid and the air burned the lungs of weaker creatures. Only the strongest could survive there, and the Kralith had become the strongest of all. They'd conquered 17 star systems, turning entire civilizations into dust and memory. Vextel remembered his first battle when he was young. The peaceful blue people of Altair had tried to surrender, offering gifts and treaties. He had laughed and ordered his warriors to burn their cities anyway. Weakness deserved no mercy. Strength was the only law that mattered in the universe. The Zenthri had been different. They were smart and had good weapons, but they were small and afraid of pain. When the Kralith ships arrived in their system, the Zenthri had fought for exactly 6 hours before their leaders killed themselves rather than face capture. Their technology now served the Kralith war machine. The Gorax had been the best fight. They were warriors like the Kralith, born for battle and raised on conflict. But they made one mistake. They fought with honor. Honor was a weakness. The Kralith had cut out of themselves long ago. When the Gorak fleet met them in open battle, Vextel had his ships target their civilian worlds instead. The Gorak warriors had to choose between victory and saving their families. They chose their families and died for it. Now, Vextel looked at the star charts showing a new system. Sol, the locals called it. A young yellow star with several planets, one of which showed signs of life. The third planet was covered in water and land, with white clouds swirling around it. The creatures there called themselves humans. Report. Vexel commanded, his voice like grinding stone. Sub-Commander Korth approached, his own massive frame barely reaching Vexel's shoulder. The scans are complete, Commander. The target world has a population of approximately 7 billion humans. They have achieved nuclear weapons, but their space presence is minimal. No defensive platforms beyond their own planet, no faster than light travel. Vexel studied the data flowing across his screens. The humans looked soft and weak. They had no claws, no natural armor, no poison glands or acid spit. They were pink and brown and yellow, with thin skin that looked like it would tear at the slightest touch. Most strange of all, they had hair growing from their heads like some kind of decorative plant. Their technology level? Vextel asked. Primitive by galactic standards, Korth replied. They fight each other with metal projectiles. And explosive devices? Their largest weapons could damage our smaller ships, but nothing that could threaten a dreadnought. They have sent small vessels to their moon and nearby planets, but no permanent colonies. Vextel clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Another easy conquest. The humans would probably surrender after the first demonstration of Kralith power. Most species did when they saw what real strength looked like. But something about the planet nagged at him. He pulled up the environmental data and studied it more carefully. Earth was not the gentle paradise world that most civilizations came from. The temperature changed wildly from season to season. Massive storms swept across the oceans with enough force to level cities. The ground itself moved and shook, creating mountains and destroying them again. Volcanoes spewed liquid rock into the sky. The weather could shift from peaceful to deadly in minutes. This world, Vexel said slowly, it is almost like a death world. Korth looked at the data again. True, Commander, but nothing compared to Vorthok, and the humans seem to thrive in these conditions. They have built cities everywhere, even in the most dangerous places. That was interesting. Most species lived in the safest parts of their worlds, hiding from danger and building walls against the wild. But the humans had spread across their entire planet. They lived on floating ice in the frozen regions. They built cities in places where the ground shook and fire came from below. They sailed boats across oceans filled with creatures that could swallow them whole. Vexel called up more detailed scans of human society. What he saw puzzled him further. The humans fought each other constantly, but not like animals fighting. For food, they organized their violence, planned it, made it into an art. Their wars were complex things with strategies and tactics that reminded him of Kralith military doctrine. He watched recorded footage of human soldiers moving through destroyed cities. They did not run from danger like prey animals. They moved toward it, with weapons ready and eyes alert. When their comrades fell, they did not flee. They fought harder. When faced with impossible odds, they did not surrender. They found ways to make the impossible merely difficult. These humans, Vexel said, show me their entertainment. Korth looked confused but obeyed. Soon the screens filled with human movies and games and stories. Vexel watched in growing amazement as the humans told themselves tales of fighting. Monsters, exploring dangerous places, and never giving up, no matter how bad things got. Their heroes were not the strongest or the smartest. Their heroes were the ones who kept fighting when everyone else had fallen. In one story, a small group of humans fought an alien invasion with nothing but primitive weapons and determination. In another, a single human woman battled a creature that could not be killed, finding new ways to fight it again and again. Their entertainment was full of violence and struggle, but also something else, the idea that any challenge could be overcome with enough effort and clever thinking. "Commander," said war leader Zackle from across the bridge, "the fleet is ready for jump to the human system. Shall we begin the attack immediately upon arrival?" Vexel considered this. All standard Kralith doctrine was simple. Arrive, demonstrate. Overwhelming force, accept surrender, or destroy all resistance. It had worked on every world they had ever encountered. But something about these humans made him pause. "No," he said finally. "We will follow the old protocols. Send them a message demanding surrender. Give them time to consider their position." Several of his officers looked surprised. The Kralith had not bothered with surrender demands in over 50 years. Why waste time when the outcome was always the same? "How much time, Commander?" Korth asked. Vexta looked at the image of Earth spinning slowly on his screen. Such a small blue world, such soft, weak creatures living on it. And yet something about them reminded him of the Kralith themselves in the early days, when they had first reached for the stars. 72 of their hours, he said. "Let them see our ships and understand what they face. If they surrender, we will follow standard occupation procedures. If they resist, ... double quotes, he did not need to finish the sentence. Every warrior on the bridge knew what happened to species that resisted the Kralith. Their worlds became graveyards. Their civilizations became cautionary tales told to frighten other species into compliance. The fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. 12 massive dreadnoughts, each carrying enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Castile settled into his command throne and activated the jump sequence. Soon, they would arrive in the Sol system, and the humans would learn what it meant to face the apex predators of the galaxy. But as the stars stretched into lines around his ship, Vexthal found himself wondering if the humans would surprise him. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever made him curious about their response. Most begged for mercy or died screaming. A few tried to fight and failed quickly. These humans, though, might be different. They lived on a world that tried to kill them every day, and they had not just survived but flourished. They told themselves stories about never giving up, and they seemed to believe those stories. They fought each other with skill and determination, turning war into science, perhaps, Vexel thought as his ship flew toward Earth. These humans would provide an interesting diversion before the inevitable end. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. He stood on the observation deck of Defender Station, watching Earth turn slowly below him. The blue and white marble looked peaceful in the morning sun. With no hint of the chaos that was about to begin, Jake had been a Marine for 15 years before joining the Space Defense Initiative. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth and thought he had seen everything. The experimental defense platform he now commanded was humanity's first real attempt at protecting themselves from threats beyond their world. It had seemed like science fiction just a few years ago. Now it felt like humanity's only hope. The alarm started screaming at exactly 0847 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Jake dropped his coffee cup and ran to the command center, where Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was staring at her screens with wide eyes. "Report," Jake ordered, sliding into his command chair. "Sir, we have 12 massive contacts appearing at the edge of the solar system," Amy said, her voice tight with controlled panic. They just materialized out of nowhere. No engine signatures, no approach vector. They're just there. Jake looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. Each contact was enormous, bigger than anything humanity had ever built. The largest was over 2 miles long and bristled with weapon systems that their computers could not even identify. They hung in space like black daggers pointed at Earth's heart. "Are they moving?" Jake asked. "Negative, sir." "They're holding position beyond Neptune's orbit. But, sir, we're getting communications from every major power on Earth. Everyone's asking." "The same question?" Jake nodded grimly. What the hell were those things? And what did they want? He had a feeling they were about to find out. The answer came 6 hours later in the form of a transmission that reached every radio, television, and communication device on Earth simultaneously. The message was in perfect English, though the voice that spoke it sounded like grinding stone mixed with winter wind. "Creatures of the third planet. You are now subjects of the Kralith Empire. I am Commander Vextel of the Iron Talon Fleet. Your world has been claimed in the name of our people. You have 72 of your hours to surrender unconditionally. Gather your leaders in your largest population centers and await our arrival. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence for exactly 37 seconds. Then every communication system on the planet exploded into activity. Jake found himself at the center of a storm of incoming calls. Admiral Hayes from Naval Command was shouting orders over one channel while President Carter tried to coordinate with world leaders on another. Secretary General of the United Nations was demanding information that nobody had. Military commanders from every nation were asking questions that nobody could answer. "Sir," Amy called out over the chaos, "we're getting detailed scans of the alien ships. The computer analysis is complete." Jake looked at the data and felt his stomach drop. Each alien vessel carried enough firepower to destroy entire continents. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. The weapons mounted on just one of their ships could turn Earth's entire military into vapor in minutes. "What about their defenses?" Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Impenetrable by any weapon we have," Amy replied.
Ow.
"Our nuclear missiles might scratch their paint. Maybe." Over the next 24 hours, Jake watched humanity react to the alien ultimatum in ways that both terrified and amazed him. Some people panicked, as expected. Riots broke out in several major cities as people tried to flee to nowhere in particular. Stock markets crashed and governments declared martial law. But something else happened that the aliens probably had not expected. Humanity did not break. Instead of collapsing into chaos, people began organizing. Military units that had been enemies for decades started sharing intelligence and coordinating strategies. Scientists who had never spoken to each other began working together to analyze the alien technology. Engineers started building weapons and defenses with a speed that defied belief. Jake received a call from General Martinez at Nord 48. Hours after first contact. "Morrison, we need you to coordinate orbital defense. Every satellite, every platform, every piece of junk floating up there that can hold a weapon." "Sir, with respect, we might as well throw rocks at them," Jake replied. "Maybe," Martinez said. "But we're going to throw the biggest damn rocks we can find, and we're going to throw them smart. Get me everything you have on their ship positions and movement patterns." Jake found himself working 8-hour days, coordinating with military, Leaders he had only heard about in briefings: Colonel Kate Williams from the Army's Special Operations Command, Major Ryan Cooper from the Air Force's Experimental Weapons Program, Captain Lisa Garcia from the Navy's Submarine Fleet. All of them asking the same questions. How do we fight something we cannot hurt? How do we win against impossible odds? Answer, Jake realized, was not to win. It was to make the victory so expensive that the aliens would think twice about paying the price. On the morning of the third day, Jake received a priority transmission from the surface. Dr. Helen Parker, a xenobiologist from MIT, had been studying the alien communications and had some disturbing news. "Captain Morrison, I've been analyzing their language patterns and comparing them to their ultimatum," she said over the video link. "These Kralith, they're not just conquerors, they're apex predators. Everything about their communication suggests a species that has never encountered real resistance." "What does that mean for us?" Jake asked. "It means they expect us to surrender or die quickly," Helen replied. "They've probably never had to fight a prolonged campaign against a determined enemy. They're used to overwhelming force, ending conflicts in days or weeks." Jake considered this information. "So if we can make them fight longer than they expect, we might make them reconsider their approach," Helen finished. "Or we might just make them angry enough to kill us all immediately. It's a gamble." Everything was a gamble now. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing Earth's hastily assembled defenses. Orbital platforms that had been built for peaceful research now bristled with every weapon humanity could mount on them. Lunar bases that had been mining operations were being converted into missile batteries. Even the International Space Station had been armed with experimental railguns. It was not enough. Everyone knew it was not enough. But it was what they had. The alien deadline expired at 0847 hours on the fourth day, exactly 72 hours after their arrival. Jake waited on his bridge, surrounded by his crew of 30 specialists who had volunteered to stay at their posts even though everyone knew what was coming. "Sir," Amy reported, "the alien ships are moving. All 12 contacts are changing course toward Earth." Jake nodded and opened a channel to every human military unit in the solar system. "All stations, this is Defender Station. The aliens are coming. Remember, we are not trying to win this fight. We are trying to show them that humanity does not die quietly. Make every shot count. Make them remember us." The response came from 100 different voices on a dozen different frequencies. "Copy. Defender Station. See you on the other side." Jake watched the alien ships accelerate toward Earth with technology that bent the laws of physics. Their own ships moved like slugs in comparison, but they moved with purpose. Humanity's orbital defenses were a joke compared to alien technology, but they were humanity's joke. And humans had always been good at making their enemies learn to respect their humor. "Amy," Jake said quietly, "send a message to Earth. Tell them the aliens are coming and we're going to meet them. Tell them that whatever happens up here, the people on the surface should remember something important." "What's that, sir?" Jake smiled grimly as he watched the alien fleet approach. "Tell them that humans have never been good at following orders, especially orders from people who think they're stronger than us." The first alien ship entered Earth's defensive perimeter 3 hours later, and the real war began. Vextel stood on his command bridge and stared at the tactical displays in complete confusion. This was not how invasions were supposed to work. The human deadline had expired 3 days ago. His fleet had moved into attack position around there. Blue World, expecting the usual pattern of conquest. First, the orbital bombardment to destroy their military installations. Then, the landing forces to secure population centers. Finally, the occupation forces to process survivors and strip the world of useful resources. But the humans were not following the script. When the first Kralith dropships descended toward the major cities, they had expected to find cowering civilians or desperate last stands. Instead, they found something that had not appeared in Kralith's tactical manuals for over 200 years. The humans were fighting smart. "Report from the Los Angeles landing zone," Subcommander Korth announced, voice tight with frustration. "Vextel, activated the communication link, and listened to War Leader Thandel describe the situation on the ground. "Commander, we have secured the initial landing site, but the humans have disappeared. The entire city appears to be empty, but our sensors detect movement in the structures around us. When we advance, they attack from hidden positions and then vanish again." "How many casualties?" Vexel asked. 17 warriors dead, 43 wounded, Thandel replied. "The humans use projectile weapons that should not be able to penetrate our armor, but they aim for weak points with incredible precision. They know exactly where to shoot." This made no sense. The Kralith had conquered worlds with populations in the billions without losing 17 warriors in the first week. These humans were supposed to be soft and weak, but they were killing professional soldiers who had trained for warfare since birth. Vexel switched to the New York battle zone and received an even more disturbing report. War Leader Kexmal was requesting reinforcements after losing 2 entire squads to what the humans called an ambush. The humans had turned their own city into a trap, using the tall buildings and underground tunnels to move around like predators stalking prey. "They fight like us," Kexmal reported, "but worse. They fight like us, but they know this terrain better than we know our own ships. Every street corner could hide a dozen enemies. Every building could be a fortress. We advance and they fade away, then attack us from behind." On the surface of Earth, Staff Sergeant Rick Chen crouched in the ruins of what had once been a coffee shop in downtown Los Angeles. His team of 8 Marines had been cut off from command for 6 hours, but instead of fear, Rick felt something familiar. The zone. That perfect state of mind where training, instinct, and pure human stubbornness combined into something greater than the sum of its parts. He had felt it before. During his 3 tours in Afghanistan, the feeling that came when everything was going wrong but you still had a job to do, when the odds were impossible but giving up was not an option, when you stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about making the enemy pay for every inch of ground. "Martinez, you see that big, ugly bastard with the extra arms?" Rick whispered into his cum unit. "Got him in my sights, Sergeant," came the reply from the sniper positioned 3 blocks away. "Lisa, Danny, you ready with the surprise package?" "Ready, Sergeant," responded. The 2 Marines crouched in the parking garage across the street. They had spent 4 hours rigging the entire structure with every explosive they could find. Rick watched the Kralith patrol move through the intersection below. 12 alien warriors, each one twice the size of a human, and armed with weapons that could melt steel. They moved with the confidence of apex predators who had never encountered real opposition. They were about to learn something new. "Execute," Rick commanded. The first shot came from Martinez's position. A single rifle bullet that found the gap in a Kralith warrior's neck armor. The alien dropped like a stone, black blood spreading across the concrete. Before his companions could react, the parking garage exploded in a chain of blasts that brought half the structure down on top of them. The surviving Kralith scattered for cover. But there was no cover. Every building around the intersection had been prepared. Every window could hide a sniper. Every doorway could conceal a bomb. Every piece of rubble could hide a Marine with a rifle and a very bad attitude. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes. When it was over, 11 Kralith warriors were dead, and Rick's team had vanished back into the maze of ruined buildings that had once been a thriving city. On his command ship, Svextel watched similar scenes play out across the planet. The humans had abandoned their cities to his forces, but they had not surrendered them. Instead, they had turned every urban area into a killing ground, where his warriors died in 1s and 2s, picked off by enemies who seemed to know exactly how to hurt them. "Commander," reported Intelligence Officer Zulkar, "we have completed analysis of the human military doctrine. They appear to be using tactics similar to our own early warfare practices, but adapted for their terrain and technology." Studied the tactical analysis. The humans were using combined arms tactics, coordinating different types of fighters to create effects greater than the sum of their parts. They used their knowledge of local terrain to offset the Kralith advantages in technology and physical strength. Most importantly, they seemed to understand that individual battles were less important than the overall campaign. "They are making us bleed for every victory," Vexel realized. "Each success costs us more than it should." This was unprecedented. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever forced the Kralith to take significant casualties during initial planetary invasions. The humans were not just resisting, they were making resistance expensive. The situation became even more confusing when reports started coming in from combat zones around the globe. In Tokyo, human defenders had used the city's subway system to move forces around faster than Kralith. Sensors could track them. In London, they had flooded the underground tunnels to force the invaders into kill zones above ground. In Moscow, they had somehow turned the winter weather into a weapon, using snow and ice to slow down alien equipment while their own forces moved freely. But the most disturbing report came from Sydney, where war leader Vakthel had encountered something that challenged everything the Kralith thought they knew about warfare. The humans were not just fighting to delay the inevitable. They were actually enjoying it. "Commander, the enemy forces in this sector engage us with what can only be described as enthusiasm," Vakthal reported.
Axios.
"When we kill their warriors, the survivors do not retreat. They attack more aggressively. When we destroy their equipment, they improvise new weapons from the wreckage. When we corner them in impossible positions, they laugh and keep fighting." Vextel had never heard a report like this before. Species fought for territory, for resources, for survival. "I did not fight for the joy of fighting itself." That was something only the Kralith did, and they had assumed it made them unique in the galaxy. "Are you certain of this assessment?" Vexthal asked. "Completely certain, Commander. We monitored their communications during the last engagement. When reinforcements arrived to support a surrounded unit, their leader said, and I quote, 'About time you showed up.' We were just getting warmed up. They were surrounded by superior forces with no hope of victory, and they considered it the beginning of the fight, not the end." Vextel closed the communication link and stared out at the blue world turning. Slowly below his ship, for the first time in his long military career, he found himself genuinely puzzled by an enemy's behavior. The humans were losing. Every engagement resulted in more human casualties than Kralith casualties. Every battle ended with Kralith forces holding more territory than before. By every measurable standard, the invasion was proceeding according to plan, but something was wrong. His warriors were reporting to medical stations with injuries that should not be possible. His war leaders were requesting reinforcements for operations that should have been routine. His logistics officers were complaining about ammunition, expenditure rates that exceeded all projections. The humans were losing every battle. But somehow, they were making the Kralith lose the war. "Sub-Commander Korth," Vextel called. "Prepare a full analysis of our combat effectiveness. I want to know exactly what these humans are doing to us." As he waited for the report, Vextel found himself remembering the old stories his grandfather had told him about the early days of Kralith expansion. Stories about enemies who fought so fiercely that victory felt like defeat. Stories about worlds that cost so much to conquer that the Kralith had almost decided they were not worth taking. He had always assumed those stories were exaggerations, meant to teach young warriors about the importance of overwhelming force. Now, he was beginning to wonder if his grandfather had been trying to warn him about something else entirely. The strongest species in the galaxy was learning what it felt like to fight someone who refused to acknowledge their strength. Dr. Helen Parker had always believed that understanding was the key to survival. As a xenobiologist, she had spent her career studying life forms that most people never dreamed existed. But nothing had prepared her for being trapped in an underground laboratory with a 12-foot-tall alien warrior who could kill her with one swipe of his claws. The bombing had started 3 hours ago. Manhattan was burning above them, and the building that housed her research facility had taken a direct hit. From something that melted concrete like butter, the basement laboratory was intact. The exits were blocked by tons of twisted metal and debris. Helen was not alone in her underground prison. Across the room, a Kraith warrior sat propped against a wall, black blood seeping from a wound in his side. His translator unit was damaged, but still working, crackling with static as he spoke in broken English. "Why do you help?" the alien asked, watching Helen clean his wound with supplies from her first aid kit. "I am enemy. I would kill you."
Helen
continued working, her hands steady despite the circumstances. She had treated wounded animals for years, and the principle was the same even if the patient was an alien invader. Because you're hurt, and I'm a doctor. That's what we do. The Kraith warrior studied her with eyes that glowed red in the emergency lighting. His name was Zikamar, she had learned, and he was what his people called war caste, born and raised. For fighting, trained from childhood to kill, without hesitation or mercy. Your people fight strangely, Zikamar said, after a long silence. We expect fear. We expect surrender. Instead, you fight like predators, defending territory. Helen finished bandaging his wound and sat back on her heels. Outside, explosions echoed through the building as the battle for New York continued above them. Maybe that's because this is our territory. This is our home, Zikamar repeated. The word as if it tasted strange. Kralith do not have homes. We have conquest zones. We have resource extraction sites. We have strategic positions, but not homes. As the hours passed, Helen found herself in the strangest conversation of her life. She learned that Kralith's society was built entirely around strength and conquest. Children were tested from birth, and the weak were left to die. Warriors who showed mercy were executed for betraying their nature. The only virtue was power, and the only goal was to take what belonged to others. But Zikamar was not what she had expected from humanity's would-be conquerors. He asked questions about human society that revealed a mind capable of doubt. He watched her tend to his injuries with what could only be described as curiosity. Most importantly, he seemed genuinely puzzled by her decision to help him despite their circumstances. In my world, Zikamar said, wounded warriors who cannot fight are left to die. It is efficient. It preserves resources for those who can still serve the Empire. Helen shook her head. That's not efficient. That's wasteful. Every life has value. Every mind has knowledge that could be useful. When you throw away the wounded, you throw away everything they've learned. The alien warrior was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than before. I have watched 17 worlds burn. I have killed creatures who begged for mercy in languages I did not understand. I have never questioned these actions because strength was the only truth I knew. And now? Helen asked. Zikamar looked at his bandaged wound. Then at the human female who had risked her own safety to treat an enemy. Now I wonder if strength and wisdom are the same thing. Above ground, the Battle of Manhattan was reaching its climax. Captain Morrison had moved his command post to a mobile unit in Central Park after Defender Station was destroyed by Kralith orbital weapons. His small fleet of human ships had been reduced to 3 vessels. But they were still fighting, still making the aliens pay for every mile of space they claimed. Sir, we're getting reports from all sectors, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez announced. From her portable communications setup. The aliens are advancing, but their casualties are mounting faster than expected. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing battles raging across the globe. The pattern was the same everywhere. Humans were losing ground. But they were making each victory expensive in ways the aliens had never experienced before. The turning point came when a group of human civilians became trapped in a collapsed apartment, building just 6 blocks from the alien command post. Both human and Kralith forces were nearby, and both had tactical reasons to ignore the situation. Morrison's troops needed to maintain their defensive positions. The aliens needed to press their advantage. But something extraordinary happened that would be remembered long after the war ended. Lieutenant Colonel Kate Williams was commanding the 82nd Airborne's remaining forces in the area when she heard the distress calls coming from the building. 37 civilians, including 12 children, were trapped in the basement while the structure burned above them. Williams to all units, she broadcast on the emergency frequency. We have civilians trapped at coordinate 77 Alpha. Need volunteers for immediate rescue operations. Ma'am, her communications officer replied. That position is under direct enemy observation. Any rescue attempt will expose our forces to concentrated fire. Kate looked at the burning building, then at the tactical display showing Kralith positions surrounding the area. The smart military decision was to leave the civilians and maintain the defensive line. The human decision was something else entirely. All units, this is Williams. We're going in. Anyone who wants to help save lives, Follow me. Anyone who wants to maintain tactical position, that's fine too. But those people aren't dying on my watch. What happened next defied every rule of warfare that either species understood. Kate led her soldiers toward the burning building in full view of Kralith positions, expecting to be cut down by alien weapons at any moment. Instead, something unprecedented occurred. Several Kralith warriors broke ranks and moved to assist. With the rescue operation, war leader Vexfer had been watching the human movements through his targeting scope. When he saw the small figures being pulled from the burning building, children, the humans were risking their lives to save their young, just as Kralith would do. But these humans were also saving the old, the weak, the injured. They were saving creatures who could not fight, who contributed nothing to the war effort. Without conscious thought, Vexfer found himself moving toward the building. His weapon was lowered, his claws extended not for killing but for digging. Through debris, other Kralith warriors followed, and within minutes, both sides were working together to save lives while their comrades continued fighting just blocks away in the underground laboratory. Helen and Ziegmer felt the building shake. As rescue teams worked above them, the alien warrior had grown progressively weaker from his injuries, but he had also grown more thoughtful. "Your species confuses us," he said quietly. "You fight with the fury of apex predators, but you also show mercy to enemies. You risk your lives for those who cannot help you win. You choose to heal instead of harm, even when harming would be easier." Helen smiled sadly. "Maybe that's what makes us human. We're strong enough to choose when not to use our strength." The rescue teams found them 8 hours later. Human and Kralith soldiers working side by side, cutting through debris with alien tools and human determination. They pulled Helen and Ziegmer from the wreckage. Both species stopped fighting long enough to ensure the wounded received medical attention. Commander Vextel watched the recordings of the rescue operation with growing amazement. His warriors and the humans had worked together seamlessly, combining their different strengths to achieve a goal that neither could have accomplished alone. For 8 hours, the war had paused while both sides remembered that some things were more important than victory. "Sub-Commander Korth," Vexel called. "Prepare a communication to the human leadership. I wish to discuss terms. Terms of surrender, Commander." Vextel continued staring at the images of his warriors helping human children escape from a burning building. "No, Korth. Terms of understanding. For the first time in Kralith history, the strongest species in the galaxy was ready to admit they might have something to learn." The war ended not with explosions or surrender, but with a single message broadcast across the galaxy. Commander Vextel stood before a communication array that reached every Kralith world. Every conquered species, every corner of their vast empire. What he was about to say would change everything. "Warriors of the Kralith Empire," his voice carried across space to millions of listeners. "For 300 years, we have been the strongest species in the galaxy. We have conquered worlds, destroyed civilizations, and proven our superiority through force. Today, I tell you that strength alone is not enough." The message continued for 20 minutes, but the most important words came at the end. "The war with humanity is over. Not because we have conquered them, and not because they have defeated us. It is over because we have both learned something more valuable than victory. We have learned what it means to be truly strong." 6 months earlier, no one could have imagined such words coming from a Kralith commander. But 6 months of fighting, humans had changed Vextel in ways he was still trying to understand. The formal ceasefire negotiations took place aboard a neutral vessel called Horizon. It was hastily converted from a research station. The meeting room held representatives from both species, but the tension that filled the air was different from what anyone expected. This was not the hatred of enemies, but the careful respect of warriors who had tested each other in battle. Vextel faced the human delegation across a metal table. Captain Jake Morrison sat at the center, his uniform bearing new scars from battles fought in space and on the ground. Dr. Helen Parker was there, along with President Robert Hayes and a dozen other human leaders. Each of them had stories of loss and courage that had brought them to this moment. "We came to your world expecting to find weakness," Vextel began, his translator rendering his words in clear English. We found instead a mirror of ourselves. You fight with the fury of a Deathworld species, but you also possess something we had forgotten existed. President Hayes leaned forward. And what is that, Commander? The strength to choose mercy over? Destruction. The wisdom to build, instead of simply conquer. The courage to help an enemy when they are wounded. That's great. His great head turned to look at Dr. Parker. Your people showed my warriors that true power is not the ability to destroy, but the knowledge of when not to destroy. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of discussing terms of surrender or tribute payments, they talked about partnership. The Kralith offered their advanced technology and military knowledge. The humans offered something equally valuable. A new way of thinking about strength, Captain Morrison. Can't. Now bearing the scars of battles fought in defense of his home, extended his hand across the table. We're not asking you to stop being Kralith. We're asking you to become more than you were before. Vextel stared at the offered hand for a long moment. In Kralith culture, touching an enemy was a sign of either dominance or submission. This was something different. This was recognition between equals. Slowly, carefully, he reached out with his own massive claw and grasped the human's hand. The gesture was awkward. Their hands were completely different, evolved on different worlds for different purposes. But somehow it worked, bridging the gap between two species that had spent months trying to kill each other. The transformation that followed was gradual but profound. Kralith's military doctrine began incorporating human concepts that had no equivalent in their language. Strategic compassion, they called it. Tactical flexibility. The idea that sometimes the strongest response was not the most violent one. Dr. Parker found herself working with Kralith scientists to understand how two such different species could have evolved similar approaches to warfare. What she discovered was that both humans and Kralith came from what the galaxy classified as Deathworlds. Planets where only the strongest survived, but where strength took many different forms. Earth taught humans to be adaptable, she explained to a gathering of Kralith researchers. Your world taught you to be individually powerful. Both approaches work, but they work better together. Warcast Zeekmer, now fully recovered from his injuries, became something unprecedented in Kralith society, a warrior diplomat. He worked with human military leaders to develop new training programs that combine the best of both species' approaches to conflict. Humans fight with their minds as much as their weapons. He told a group of young Kralith warriors, I think 3, moves ahead and turn their weaknesses into strengths. This is not cowardice. This is intelligence, and intelligence is a form of strength we had not learned to value. The changes were not limited to military matters. Kralith society had been built around the idea that the weak deserved to die, but exposure to human culture introduced concepts that challenged this fundamental belief. Humans cared for their sick, educated their children regardless of initial ability, and found ways to make even the weakest members of society contribute to the whole. For the first time in their history, Kralith began to question whether their way was the only way. The real test came when other species in the galaxy learned about the human-Kralith alliance, and he expected it to be a temporary truce, a pause before the inevitable Kralith betrayal and human destruction. Instead, they found something that defied all previous understanding of galactic politics: the Altarians. One of the first species conquered by the Kralith centuries ago, sent a diplomatic mission to Earth. They came expecting to find humans, cowering under alien rule, but instead found humans and Kralith working together as equals. Human engineers were improving Kralith technology, while Kralith warriors were learning human tactical flexibility. How is this possible? Asked Ambassador Velteran, the leader of the Altarian delegation. The Kralith destroyed our civilization. They showed no mercy, no compassion, no willingness to negotiate. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, and serving as Earth's primary liaison with the Kralith, considered the question carefully. Maybe because we showed them something they had never seen before. We showed them that being strong enough to destroy something and choosing not to destroy it requires a different kind of strength. The alliance grew stronger with each passing month. Human technology advanced by centuries with access to Kralith science. But more importantly, both species learned from each other's approaches to problems that had seemed unsolvable. When pirates attacked a joint human kraal with research station, the response was swift and decisive. But instead of simply destroying the pirates, the combined fleet captured them and offered them a choice: face execution according to galactic law, or join a rehabilitation program that would teach them more productive uses for their skills. Most chose rehabilitation. Many became valuable members of the Alliance within a year. Vexthal, now bearing the title of Ambassador Commander, often reflected on the lessons learned during those crucial months of warfare. He had expected to conquer another weak species and add their world to the Kralith Empire. Instead, he had discovered that the Empire itself was weaker than he had realized. "We were strong individually," he told a gathering of Kralith leaders via holographic transmission. "But we were weak as a civilization. We could destroy, but we had forgotten how to create. We could conquer, but we had never learned how to inspire." The humans taught us that true strength is not about being the apex predator. It is about choosing when to be the guardian instead. The strongest Deathworld species in the galaxy had encountered humanity and learned that strength could be shared rather than hoarded. In teaching the Kralith about mercy and wisdom, humans had gained access to technology and knowledge that would secure their future among the stars. But more importantly, both species had discovered that the galaxy was big enough for more than one kind of strength. The Kralith remained formidable warriors, but they were no longer destroyers. Humans remained adaptable and clever, but they were no longer alone. Years later, when new species encountered the Human-Kroth Alliance, they found something unprecedented in galactic history. Two apex predator species working together, each making the other stronger rather than weaker. The galaxy had not seen the conquest of humanity by alien invaders. Instead, it had witnessed the birth of something entirely new, a partnership between equals that would reshape the meaning of power itself. The strongest species had finally met their match, and in doing so, had learned that matching strength with strength was less powerful than combining different kinds of strength into something greater than either could achieve alone.